Go all the way back to the 2019 general election. And one of the big core promises wasn't just we're going to get Brexit done, it was leveling up. And I still think people underestimate the pull leveling up actually had to many people for the very first time ever in their lives holding their noses and voting Conservatives. Mostly, of course, it was led by Boris Johnson. And I also still don't think a lot of people have really learned their lessons from that particular election either. Like I say, time will tell whether that gets replayed again or not. But leveling up was, for many people, seen as the real genuine reason to go and vote for Boris Johnson. They felt that, they had been left behind, that this was a guy who was speaking their language, that, Boris Johnson wouldn't betray them, right? He would actually level up, he would invest, and oh my God, this is what, we've all, quote, been waiting for. Well, as I said time and time again to people, this is what David Cameron did with, the Northern Powerhouse. And the Northern Powerhouse never really got off the ground. Which, if it did, maybe things would have been very different. But of course, you had the Conservative inability to want to invest in these areas. And even when they won these seats, they didn't end up investing in them. This is why you had all those new red wall, Conservatives going, please just invest, do something, because if not, we're going to lose our seats. And guess what? They lost their seats in 2024. But here's something else that I'm not sure a lot of people really understood, or at least at this moment, because this should be, again, a big win Labour should be talking about. So far, Starmer has actually outspent Johnson on levelling up in his first year. So, goddamn Labour comms again. But of course, as always, before we get on more into this, please, of course, do remember to click on the like, share, and of course, subscribe button down below as well. Don't forget, of course, to ring the bell as well so you get notifications when we go live or when we drop a new video. There are, of course, links down below as well, the Patreon page, the Buy Me Coffee link, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there's the YouTube membership down below as well. Of course, you've got the little QR code up here, which will take you straight to the Patreon page as well. So thank you very much to all those people that do help and support the channel that way. Right. Let's continue on into this then, shall we? Because this should, once again, I think we talked a lot about war more, but you'll also see why it's not, which is also highly frustrating as well. But anyway, let's get on into this. Starmer outspends Johnson on levelling up in the first year. Labour so far invested £2 billion more on levelling up in its just first year. So, Boris Johnson's big plan as Prime Minister was to level up the investment throughout the UK. And that started, of course, in part by the pandemic. And Rishi Sunak, of course, promising the Tories of Tunbridge Wells to, quote, stop shoveling all the funding into deprived urban areas. This great vision then completely withered into piecemeal scraps from Whitehall, raffled off now to the most politically advantageous provinces. The failure, of course, of levelling up has, of course, been a profound political betrayal. Voters had, of course, counted on Johnson to change their lives and localities for the better. They got worse. But quietly, the Labour government is now spending significantly more than Johnson did in his first year on his own version of the policy. This is now reveals research said exclusively now with the New Statesman. And here you can see David Cameron, 5.2, Theresa May, 3.96, Boris Johnson, 10.57, Rishi Sunak, 5.43, Keir Starmer, 18.03. I honestly have to wonder, because we've been here before when we've talked about this. I do feel there's a lot of people out there who don't really care when good stuff like this happens or when the government does a good policy. I think they only want to talk about the bad um, on this. And I think that's, well, bad in itself. I think that's not giving a fair shake at what's really going on in politics. And we have, as I've said many, many times before, a government that is getting on, doing its job, governing. It's not wasting time in pointless disputes and petty squabbles that we've seen through Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson, Theresa May, even to the David Cameron years. We actually have a government for the first time ever that is doing stuff. But the problem is, it's not communicating. It's not telling people it's doing this stuff. Sebastian Gorka, a fantastic guy to follow on Twitter, Blue Sky, etc., and then sign up to his email he's got called Clear the Lobby, tells you every week what is going on in Parliament. He does a weekly post that is saying, this is the good stuff this government has done this week. Why aren't people talking more about the good stuff that's happening? And that is because there is a perception this government isn't working, that it's a failure. That couldn't be further from the truth. And I have to wonder at the moment whether maybe we get into like the end of like 2026, 27, maybe in 2028, and then all of a sudden people will just suddenly sort of turn around and go, hold on, things aren't that bad because of this level and type of investment going on. I generally have to wonder, will we get to that point? Who knows? We'll wait and see what happens. But it bizarrely feels like that's might what happen. Feel free to chastise me if you want on that, but it sure feels like that's what might end up happening. So, in his first year in office, Keir Starmer's government has so far invested over £2 billion more than Johnson did in his first year, with 4.3 billion allocated now to regional investment programs in Labour's first year, compared with just 2.5 billion spent now in that equivalent period under Johnson, according now to new analysis by the Independent Commission for Neighbourhoods. Investment, of course, in the Northeast will be 7 times higher than under Johnson, 5 times higher in the Northwest and Yorkshire, and the Humber by the end of Parliament, based on current trends identified by this analysis of over 46 government programmes and funds. And this is part of the problem, that you've got all these different programmes, all these different pots of money. Someone needs to get out there and start joining up these dots and start telling a coherent story of what this funding is actually doing. So, back to this. In fact, Starmer's government currently already has committed funding to the equivalent of over 70% of the entirety now of Johnson's levelling up allocation in just 14 months in office. So think about that. They've spent 70% of the entirety that Boris Johnson had ever done for levelling up in just 14 months in office. It is now on track to invest over £36 billion in such schemes, 3 times, of course, the level under Boris Johnson. It is also now weighing this funding now towards more towards the north, with over 51% of the money going to northern regions, just compared to 41% under Johnson. It is very clear from all these figures that Labour is willing to spend significantly more than its predecessors on improving these areas. But of course, this doesn't guarantee success. It is, again, the problem. So, first of all, even if people do end up with nicer neighbourhoods as a result of this funding, public awareness of such schemes is, of course, very low, far below any other policy announcements, of course, made by Labour in its first year in office. According now to the polling by the community business network Power to Change, voters may thank their council or even their mayor, but no one in particular, rather than, of course, currently Starmer's government. But of course, more importantly, this funding is all analysed and is now drawn down from 46 different pots. This doesn't, again, cohere into one plan, with a vision and a story to tell to try and tackle Britain's areas of greatest disadvantage, which of course is the problem. That's what it needs to start doing. It needs to start getting this story together, start telling this is what we've done. Great that they're, getting on with the job of government. Do I like everything that you've done so far in government? No. But when they're doing stuff like this and they're investing and they're doing what they said they would do, you know, and then not a lot of people end up talking about it. Why do a lot of people only ever talk about the negative that the current government ends up doing? I mean, sure, it gets the clicks, sure, it gets, the rage bait, etc. But this government isn't as bad, I think, as people make it out to be. I think that's very, very telling, honestly. But there you go. So, anyway, what do you think about all this? I think, honestly, this is fantastic news. I think, once again, this is them showing, we're getting on with the job. Um, we're getting on with it. We're doing it. Great. And the fact that they have spent, 70% of the entire Boris Johnson allocated budget to leveling up so far in their first year, it makes you question why a lot of other people out there aren't talking about it. Whether A, they know about this information, or whether themselves they don't know about this information because, Labour doesn't talk about it. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, let me know what you think down below in the comments. And of course, we'll see you all next time.